Never meant to tell this story. Not here. Not like this. But when the lawyer slid that old photograph across the table, the one of Jay and me as kids, grinning with scraped knees and a line carved into the wood between us, I realized silence was just another way of lying. Because that line between us never really faded. We just learned how to pretend it wasn't there. So here I am, sitting on the floor of my tiny apartment, the ring light reflecting off that same framed photo behind me, about to tell you how everything I thought I knew about love, family, and loyalty cracked open, starting the day I married Daniel. Jay stood beside him that afternoon, smiling wider than the groom, glass in hand, voice steady. "To my baby sister," he said, eyes finding mine across the crowd, "who always believed in me, even when I gave her every reason not to." Everyone laughed. Everyone but me. Because even then, something in the way he said it told me this story wasn't over, and that the line between us was about to be crossed for good. If this were a movie, you'd see the camera pan to my mother's face, the way her eyes shone when she looked at us, like she was seeing a future she could finally rest in. You'd see the way Daniel squeezed my hand under the table, the way Jay leaned back in his chair like he didn't have a worry in the world. But real life isn't a movie. The camera's in my hands, and I missed it. I missed all the signs. The first big crack came that winter. Jay was late on everything. Rent, car, a personal loan he'd taken with a guy who looked like he slept in a leather jacket. He started showing up at the store less, taking side gigs he wouldn't explain. He was always one step ahead of the consequence. Then one night in January, he came to our apartment, eyes wild, talking too fast. He needed $15,000 by Friday, or things would get ugly. He said it like he was warning me about a storm. I didn't have $15,000. Between the store bleeding cash and the money Daniel and I were trying to save to maybe move into something not shaped like a hallway, we were stretched. I could feel the panic rising in my throat like I'd swallowed a balloon. "It's my fault," Jay said. I made some dumb bets." He was biting his lower lip, a habit from childhood I'd only seen when we got caught sneaking cookies. "I swear to God, Lena, I'll pay you back. I'll pay you back with interest. I just need help getting my head above water, okay? Please." Mom sat very still on the couch, hands folded in her lap like she was praying with her eyes open. She was the only one in the room truly understanding what it means to have nothing. She touched my knee and said in Spanish, "You don't owe anyone your future." But love makes its own books. It writes its own loans. I looked at Jay and saw the boy who once took the blame for breaking our neighbor's window so I wouldn't get in trouble. I saw summer heat and creek water and smoke rings dissolving in the dark. I signed for a personal loan with a terrifying interest rate. I justified it by calling it a bridge. Bridges get you to the other side, right? Daniel wasn't convinced. He sat at the kitchen table that night with his hands steepled, staring at the paperwork like it had offended him. "This isn't a joke," he said. "You can't be doing this every time he decides to act like a child." "It's once," I said. "It's my brother." "It's always once," he said. But then he hugged me, and we went to bed with the kind of silence that feels like an IOU. Here's the thing about bridges. They don't matter if you walk the wrong direction after you cross. The money came and went. Jay paid me back a little, then nothing at all. He dodged my calls. When I did see him, he was an apology with legs. Just a little longer. I'm getting work together with a guy. It's gonna pay, I swear. I imagine a version of my life where I set a boundary then and stuck to it, where I told him, "I love you," but no. But that version of me hadn't been born yet. We were trying to think of ways to keep the store alive. Catering maybe, a deli counter, more community events, when Daniel suggested something else. "Food trucks are killing it," he said. "People line up for a good sandwich and a story. You have both. Make your mom's recipes, tell people your dad used to give away eggs, name it after the store. I can handle some of the construction. Jay knows everyone in town. We could make this family." It felt like a lifeline. I could see it in my head. The truck painted a deep teal with hand-drawn lettering, me handing plates to people hovering at the window, the sound of someone biting into something that tastes like home. "Luna's kitchen," I said, because my dad used to call me his little moon. "We can do empanadas, rice bowls, soups in winter, tostadas with that tangy slaw, the pickled onions you like." That's it, Daniel said, smiling. Jay nodded along, already making lists. For a minute, the three of us were orbiting the same planet, close enough to feel the same heat. We pooled everything we had. We took a smaller loan, this one through a bank with terms I thought I understood. I registered an LLC with all of our names on it. In a move that makes me want to scream when I look back, I trusted Jay to handle some of the paperwork because he said he had a guy. We found an old postal truck and rebuilt it from the inside out, sweating through July so the fryer would hum by September. We bought a second-hand point-of-sale system that I begged to be reliable. We posted on Facebook and Instagram, plastered flyers at the community college, drove the truck to the farmer's market, and popped the window like we were opening a chest of treasure. On our first day, we sold out by 2. People hugged me. Old customers from the store lined up and told me my dad would have been proud. We went home with grease in our hair and money in the till, our bodies buzzing with fatigue and triumph. For the first time in years, the numbers in my spreadsheet looked like they could spell relief. 2 weeks later, my mother called to say a man had come to the store with papers about the building. She didn't understand half of it, but it made her cheek twitch the way it did when she thought she was being lied to. I went down during our off hours, lugging a box of paperwork like it was a life raft. The man at the desk explained in jargon: taxes, liens, outstanding balances. The building was underwater. We could renegotiate, but we lacked collateral. Then he said it. We could sell. We don't want to sell, I said. My father died in that store. The man softened. I understand, Miss Molina, but sentiment doesn't make the numbers friendlier. If you can't manage these new terms, you're going to lose this property for less than you could get for it now. We ended up selling. It felt like I was peeling my skin off, inch by inch. We used some money to pay off the worst debts and put the rest in a savings account for my mother. I told her we'd spend the holidays somewhere new, not over a grocery with thin walls and windows that never quite shut right. I told her the truck would carry the spirit of the store. She nodded like she was blessing me and looked very small in the big office chair behind the counter, surrounded by shelves of canned beans and cheap toilet paper. The day we locked the door and handed the keys to a new owner, my mother pressed her palm to the wood. "Gracias," she whispered. "Thank you." The truck kept doing well. It became the way I measured time. I woke up at 5, cooked until 9, parked by 10, served and smiled, and told our story until the sun slid down, scrubbed coolers, answered emails, did inventory, slept. Daniel helped with the building maintenance and the books. Jay showed up sometimes late, always with a story, traffic, a flat, a meeting. He was good with customers when he was there, a natural at mirroring whoever he was with. People like to be seen. He was a mirror, not a window. We hired a part-time assistant named Naomi, who came with hands so quick and sure I wanted to put them in an art museum. There were emails between Daniel and Jay about moving assets and protecting from exposure. There was a copy of a promissory note I never signed. There was my signature, shaky but mine, on an addendum authorizing Jay to act on behalf of our company in certain contexts. The signature was a photocopy. He'd had me sign a delivery form one morning when I was juggling onions and eggs and a phone call from a supplier. I didn't read it. It wasn't a delivery form. There was a business plan for a bar called Pine Street, with a menu that looked suspiciously like mine, down to the aioli recipe with the lemon zest I added so it wouldn't taste flat. I was staring at a Betrayal with letterhead. The room felt too small. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears like a terrible song. I went to the living room and sat on the floor, holding the folder like it might bite. When Daniel came home, his cheeks had more color than usual. He saw me, saw the papers, and stopped. "Okay," he said. "Hands up." "Okay. Breathe." "Don't tell me to breathe," I said. My voice was foreign in my throat. "Tell me what this is." "It's a pivot," he said. "It's diversifying. It's moving from a truck to a brick and mortar with backers who want in." "It's theft," I said. "You stole from me. You stole from us, with my brother." He shook his head, sat in front of me. "I didn't steal. I borrowed from growth. This is ours. It's going to be bigger than you think. And you didn't tell me because you panic," he said. "You are good at what you do, but you get scared. You cling. I had to move while the opportunity was hot. I am your wife, I said, each word a suitcase I threw. I am not a panic. I am not cling. I am the reason there is anything to move. He looked tired. It's not like that. Jay and I... He stopped, realizing what that did to my face. He's your brother, he said, as if that would sweeten the poison. I was trembling. How much? Enough to get the build-out going. How much? He swallowed. He said a number that blanked my vision for a second. Your body knows a kind of betrayal you don't have words for. My hands went numb. My skin felt tight. I wanted to scream loud enough to collapse the building. I wanted to sleep for a year. I did neither. I went to the bathroom, threw up, and then sat on the edge of the tub, looking at the tile like it could tell me what to do. Daniel didn't follow me. He was a ghost at the doorway, waiting for a verdict. When I came back into the living room, I said, "Give me the keys to the truck." He checked his pockets, handed them over without looking at me. I put the folder in a bag and walked out into a night that smelled like rain. Naomi answered on the second ring. "I need you," I said. "Okay," she said. "No questions. I'm at my cousin's. I'm coming." We made a pot of coffee and spread the papers on my mother's kitchen table. The one with the scratch. The one sitting in her new rental 2 blocks from where the store used to be. Mom wore her nightgown and sat with us, hands wrapped around a mug like a question. We read every line. We mapped every transfer. We circled dates. Naomi took pictures and made a timeline. She said words like embezzlement and fiduciary duty. She said, "Do you have an attorney?" I said, "No, I have a food truck and a heartbeat." At 3 a.m, I called Jay. He didn't answer. He texted, "Can't talk now." A minute later, he sent, "Don't be dramatic." Then, "This is good for us." For us. I went to the bank when it opened. The woman at the desk looked at the papers and the names and frowned like she'd bitten a lemon. She told me politely that certain actions required both signatures, and here they were. I told her that signature had crawled out of a swamp. She smiled a sympathetic smile and gave me a card for their in-house financial advisor. I wanted to flip her desk. There's a part of me that wonders if I made everything worse by doing what I did next. If I had waited, if I had said nothing, would they have returned more? Could I have kept it quiet? But I am a girl who grew up watching her father call out things as he saw them, and I borrowed his bravery like a suit that almost fit. I went to see a lawyer named Evan, recommended by a woman in line at the DMV who heard me telling my mother on the phone that I was going to burn down something that couldn't legally burn. Evan, thin and tired-looking, specialized in small business disputes. He read the documents with a pen in his mouth and made faces. He said they're sloppy a few times. He said, "You have a case," a few more. He explained words I didn't know. He said, "We can file an injunction. We can put a freeze on questionable transfers. We can demand accounting. We can sue." "Will it give me back my life?" I asked. He paused. "It might give you back some money. It might be hell, but it'll be hell towards something." I paid him with money I didn't have, because sometimes you buy the only path that isn't a cliff. The next 3 months were ugly in the kind of way that doesn't make TV. It was eating saltines over the sink because you had to choose between groceries and bill defenses. It was early morning on the truck, smiling with teeth that ached, serving people who told me they heard I was branching out. And how exciting! It was paperwork so dense I dreamed in subpoenas. It was my mother's quiet as she folded towels, so careful with my spirits I wanted to break. It was Daniel and Jay doubling down, opening Pine Street with bulbs strung overhead and a curated playlist and a menu that butchered my recipes enough to plausibly deny them. There were pictures on social media of my husband and my brother smiling for big shots, of their soft opening with local influencers, of the neon sign that looked like it had taken my heart and bent it into a drink. It was people I knew smiling in those pictures like I couldn't see them. I almost didn't go. Naomi insisted. "You need to see it," she said. "For evidence. For your own sanity." We put on black and walked in like we were invisible. The air smelled like citrus and salt. The host stand was manned by someone who used to buy cheese from my dad on Sundays. He looked at me, his expression flickering, then looking away. We sat at the bar. Daniel was working in the room. Jay was in the back. I could feel them like you feel lightning, even when you're inside. The bartender handed us menus with polite eyes that skimmed like a stone across the surface of a lake. My hands shook. Naomi kept hers steady, her nails short and practical and painted clear. In the corner, a chalkboard listed specials. There it was, Luna's aioli, served with our crispy potato bites. I felt heat rise up my neck. I got up, walked to the chalkboard, and took a picture with my phone. Daniel saw me. He stopped. Our eyes caught. Something like guilt flickered, then hardened into something else. He didn't come over. He looked away. Jay came out from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He saw me and smiled like we were at a family reunion. He walked toward me, arms open. I stepped back. He frowned, then set his face into that charm he wore like cologne. "Sis," he said, "you look good." "You look like a thief," I said, and for a second, everything got quiet around us. He leaned in, voice low. "Don't make a scene," he said. "Why not?" I said, "It's what you do best." He stepped back, shook his head, and laughed like I'd told a joke. He touched my arm. "You don't understand business," he said. "You're emotional." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'm honest." Naomi took my elbow. "Let's go," she said. I could feel eyes on my back as we left. The night air outside felt like truth. It turns out revenge is not the satisfying snap of a trap you imagine. It's a slow tide, and it doesn't care how tired you are. We filed the injunction. We got a temporary freeze on their accounts, enough to stall, not enough to stop. We settled into a rhythm of court dates, affidavits, emails sent into silence. I learned to sit still in uncomfortable chairs. I learned to read faces across conference tables. I learned that justice wears a suit and takes a long lunch. At the same time, something else was happening. People started to notice. Not everyone, some people never do, but enough. A blogger who had bought my empanadas since I was 19 wrote a post about supporting originals over copies. A photography student asked to do a project on resilience in small business and took a photo of me with my arms in dough, flour in my hair. Naomi started an Instagram series called Behind the Window, posted pictures of us at 5 a.m., and wrote captions about the process. We didn't call out Pine Street by name. We didn't have to. People read between the lines. The line got longer. I did something I'm not proud of, but would do again. I recorded a conversation with Jay a week before the first hearing. He called, asking to meet as family. We went to the park by the creek where we used to skip rocks. He looked older than he should, eyes bruised underneath with the strain of carrying lies. He wore cologne too strongly, as if the smell could erase what was true. "Stop this," he said, letting water peppers rustle under his sneakers. "This lawyer stuff. You're going to bankrupt us all." "You stole from me," I said. "You're making money on my recipes. You forged my signature." He lifted his chin. "You signed that. You were distracted." "That's not my fault." "It is your fault," I said. "It is exactly your fault." He sat down on the old bench where we used to eat popsicles and declare flavors as if we were judges in a court of orange. "I did what I had to do," he said. "You wouldn't move. You never have. You cling to mom, to the past, to the idea that loyalty fixes math. It doesn't." "Loyalty doesn't fix math," I said. "But it matters, and I was loyal to you. You used it like a shovel to dig a hole under my feet." He rubbed his eyes. "You think this was easy?" he said. "You think I didn't have to talk to investors and smile and pretend I wasn't dying? You think it's easy for me to be the bad guy?" "Then don't be," I said, and it was so simple that it sounded stupid. He laughed, short and bitter. "You never understood the way the world works," he said. He looked tired of me. He looked tired of himself. I went home and sent the audio to Evan. He said it was borderline, but usable in context. "They think they're smarter than you," he said. "Good. That's their weakness." The first hearing went our way. Then the second wobbled like a table with one leg shorter than the others. I learned that the truth is sometimes not enough. You need paper. You need dates. You need patience. I was not patient. I had to become so. One day, my mother fell in the kitchen and laughed at herself as she got up. She said she was fine. She wasn't. Her hip was fragile. The doctor frowned in that way. They do when they don't want to be the bearer of the obvious. She had to move in with me. Then I had to move us both into a smaller place because my rent was killing me. I turned our bedroom into a little sanctuary with the only good sunlight in the apartment. Hung cheap white curtains that made the morning feel like mercy. Sometimes she'd wake me up at 2 in the morning to ask me if I'd eaten. I'd say yes. Sometimes I'd be lying. She knew. Pine Street started strong, then something cracked. People talk. They might not share posts, but they share stories. A kid from high school whose mom used to shop at our store posted a video comparing my empanadas to theirs. It wasn't kind. It wasn't cruel either. It was factual. One's made with love, he said, and I cried for an hour, then got up and folded napkins. We won a motion compelling a full accounting, which meant they had to open their books. What spilled out was a mess. Sloppy transfers, receipts without receipts, cash put into envelopes labeled dumb things like consulting, with my name misspelled in the memo, probably to pretend ignorance. Evan rubbed his temples and smiled at the same time. "They're exactly as careless as you said," he said. "It'll take time. Keep breathing." Breathing became a discipline. I learned square breathing in a YouTube video at 2 in the morning, counting the seconds like a child counting cracks in a ceiling. I drank water like it had a job. I returned to my father's habit of writing lists on receipts. Some days the list was simply, wake up, cook, serve, hug mom, sleep, repeat. The repetition felt like a prayer. Then an unlikely thing happened. The local news station did a segment on small businesses weathering storms, and someone gave them my name. They filmed me at the truck, hair up in a scarf, and he had beaded sweat on my temple and smiled when I handed them a plate. They stood under the awning while it rained, and I told the story without naming names. We had a partner who took money without telling us. We are fighting. We are feeding people while we fight. A lawyer called the station asking for equal airtime. The station declined. The segment aired that evening. The line the next day stretched around the corner. I should have felt vindicated. I felt human. People handed me 20s and told me to keep the change. People brought their parents to taste their childhood. I went to bed with exhaustion wrapped around me like a blanket with holes. It kept me warm enough. 2 weeks later, Pine Street posted a fundraiser for a burst pipe disaster. Daniel emailed me, asking to pause the legal process for the good of everyone. I didn't respond. My lawyer did. They wanted sympathy. They got into litigation. It's a cruel thing to say, but I was done being kind to the hands that pushed me down. I saw Daniel once during that time, outside the hardware store, of all places. He looked thinner. He had the beard of a man who forgot who he wanted to be or remembered and couldn't afford it. He saw me and stopped. People were 3 feet away and also 1,000 miles. He said, "Can we talk?" I said, "We are." He said, "I miss you?" I said, "You miss what was easy." He said, "It could be easy again." I said, "It was never easy. You were just comfortable." He flinched like I'd thrown something. He walked away. I watched him go and felt a grief more complicated than hate. For a month afterward, when I woke up, I reached for the missing shape beside me. Habit is a kind of ghost. When our case finally sat in front of a judge who looked exactly like every math teacher I'd ever had, we had a binder of proof so thick it hurt to pick up. Their lawyer wore a suit that cost more than my rent. He smiled like a polished cabinet. He argued that creative financial strategies were misinterpreted, that borrowed growth wasn't theft. Evan didn't smile. He wore a tie with a small stain near the knot and said, without heat, that calling black white doesn't make it snow. He handed over the emails, the notes, the audio, the transfers. He said, "We are asking for what was stolen and for damages because of the harm done." The judge listened. He asked a few questions that were cut like knives. He looked at Daniel when he asked them. A choice, maybe, or maybe not. He looked at me the way math teachers look at you when you've done your homework and still need help. He told us to come back in a week for his decision. A week is very long when your life is on hold, and very short when your heart is smashing against your ribs. I cooked. I served. I held my mother's hand while she watched telenovelas and pretended not to understand the plot so I could summarize it and hear my own voice steady. I went to bed early and lay awake. When the day came, I went to the courthouse with Naomi because she had become my sister in truth, if not in blood. We won. Not everything. This isn't a fairy tale, but enough. The judge found that Jay and Daniel had breached fiduciary duty and had embezzled funds. He awarded us damages, interest, and legal fees. He placed a lien on Pine Street. He also referred certain parts to the district attorney for review. I sat there with my heart in my mouth, listening to words that would never undo the months, the year, the grief, but that at least acknowledged them. I looked at Daniel. He looked at me. We were strangers who knew each other's tender spots. Jay stared ahead like if he didn't move, the world couldn't see him. I had a moment of wanting to reach for his hand. I didn't. You think that's the end? It wasn't. Winning in court and collecting are not the same. Their accounts were thinner than they should have been. Money had wandered. We started the process of finding it like a game of hide and seek with stakes. Pine Street closed, temporarily, then for repairs. Then the sign just disappeared. People asked me if I felt bad. I did and didn't. The part of me that is my mother wished no one hunger. The part that is my father wanted the ledger balanced. I made peace with being both. In the absence of their bar, something shifted. Other businesses reached out, wanting our truck at their events. The community college hired me to teach a workshop on starting from less than zero. I taught people how to budget with honesty, how to set boundaries with family, how to read things before signing them, how to trust people and still double check. I said out loud, "Love is not an IOU." People wrote it down. My mother's health dipped in the spring. We had a good day, the trees littering the sidewalk with petals like confetti, and she said she wanted a walk. We went slow. She held my arm lightly, like a bird might choose to land there. She said, "I'm sorry for how you learned." I said, "I'm not sorry for what you taught me." She smiled. 2 weeks later, in her sleep, she left. I found her in the morning, her face softer than I'd ever seen it. There are no words for the silence after a mother's last breath. There is only a kind of emptiness that makes everything else ring. Jay didn't come to the funeral. Daniel sent flowers with a card that said, "She was a good woman." I put the flowers in the church foyer because I didn't want them near the casket. People came and hugged me so long I worried their arms would fall off. Naomi stood on one side of me and squeezed my hand when people said ridiculous things. The priest spoke about forgiveness, and I rolled the word around in my mouth like a coin, wondering if I had change for it. In grief, the truck saved me. Routine saves the grieving. I poured my sadness into sauces. I chopped onions and cried and didn't have to explain why. People asked me for my mother's arroz con pollo, and I made it like a prayer. I added a special jar on the counter that said, "Marta's Meals." And when people threw in money, I used it to cook for people who couldn't come out. I delivered trays to the women's shelter, and the men who waited on the corner for the day's work, and the old man on our block who always yelled at kids to get off his steps, and then fed them candy. I made enough for me to eat over the sink with a spoon big enough to make someone laugh. Months later, when the check finally arrived, partial, not all, but enough, companionship settled into my bones. It arrived with a letter full of words like finalized disbursement and subject to. I held the check and shook. Naomi cried. We took a picture that you'll never see and put it in a drawer, and then we went to the truck and turned on the fryer. I used that money to do two things. I paid off the last of the personal loan that had haunted me like a whisper under a door, and I put the rest into a tiny storefront 2 blocks from where our store used to be. It had chipped tile and a window that needed love. One afternoon, alone, I went into the empty space and talked to my father like he had just stepped out for milk. "We're here again," I said. Different floor, same heart. I touched the wall like my mother had touched the wooden door and whispered, "Gracias." We opened Lena's on a Saturday in September. We had a small ribbon, like we had paper plates. We had neighbors pressed to each other like a hug. Naomi wore a white apron with my mother's name embroidered on one pocket. We hung the old Luna sign, a small one my dad had made for my 10th birthday, in the back. People cried. People laughed. People ate. I took the money with gratitude and gave it back with sauces and honesty. On the way home that night, after counting the till and scrubbing pots, I saw Jay across the street by the bus stop. He looked thinner. He wore a jacket too big for him and shoes that hurt me to look at. I stopped. People passed, not seeing the volcano between us. He looked up and saw me. For a second, his face did 100 things. Pride, shame, relief, fear. Like a deck of cards shuffled and dropped. He smiled, small. "Congrats," he said, like we were acquaintances. "Thanks," I said. The silence was a crossing guard holding a sign between us. Are you? I started, but stopped. I didn't know how to ask how someone's gotten so lost without admitting how far gone they are. He said, "It went bad." He laughed. Short. Everything went bad. I know, I said. I wasn't sure if I was talking about his life or mine or ours. He shoved his hands in his pockets. I did awful by you, he said. His voice cracked on awful. It was the first true thing he'd said to me in years. You did, I said. The air didn't crack. It just held us up. I don't know how to fix it, he said. You might not be able to, I said. Not with me. He flinched. I swallowed. But you can stop breaking other things. He nodded. The bus came. He stepped toward it, then turned back. Mom? He asked. She'd have wanted you to eat, I said, because it felt true and kind and enough. I took a container from my bag. I always carried one because late nights make hungry people, and handed it to him. He took it like it weighed more than it did. Thanks, he said. Don't thank me, I said. Do better. He got on the bus. I stood there until the taillights disappeared, the smell of brake dust and fried food, and the night pressing around me. Some of you watching this are waiting for me to say I forgave him. Some of you need me to tell you it's possible. It is. It might be. I am not there. I am not a saint. I am a woman who had to learn to be steel and soup at the same time. My revenge was not watching them suffer. It was living anyway. It was building something they couldn't touch. It was telling the truth, even when it released all the birds I had caged in my chest. Daniel left town. I heard he took a job in another state, where he tells a watered-down story where he is the guy who took a risk and got punished for it. People will tell versions of you that let them sleep. I learned to sleep on my own terms. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I think about him reaching for the light switch in some new kitchen, touching the wrong wall first. It's not kind, but it's honest. I hope he finds the switch. If you're still listening, I want to tell you this. Your boundaries are not mean. Your love is not a bank. You can say no to your family and be a good person. You can call a lawyer and still be kind. You can cook for people while you're being sued. You can hold grief and rage in the same hand and not drop either. You can carry scars and still be beautiful in ways that have nothing to do with eyes. People who come by the shop now sometimes ask for the story. I give them slices the way you give a child a piece of fruit instead of the whole thing. I tell them enough to feed them and not enough to make them choke. My favorite is when teenagers come and watch me and Naomi move around each other like choreography. They ask how we did it. I tell them about waking up and doing the next right thing. I tell them to write down everything. I tell them to be generous and precise. I tell them to build coals while everyone else is burning their houses down on purpose. Sometimes late at night, after we close, I sit on the back step with my apron still on and scroll through pictures. I find one of Jay and me at the creek. He is mid-throw, the rock a blur leaving his hand. I am laughing, head thrown back. The world is new and the horizon is a promise. I put the phone away and focus on the present's weight. It's heavier than the past, but it's real. I keep the old scratch table in a corner of the shop. I put a vase on the scratch sometimes, and sometimes I let it show. It reminds me that lines drawn in childhood can feel like bars in adulthood if you let them. It reminds me of summers and smoke rings and promises. It reminds me that betrayal burns and survival stings, and healing takes more stubbornness than skill. It reminds me to tell you this truth. Even if my voice shakes when I say it, you will survive the people who hope you don't. You will become someone new. You will still be you, just forged. And if you ever come by my place, come hungry. Ask for the aioli. I'll give you the one with more lemon than you expect. I'll tell you about my mother if you want to hear, and if you don't, I'll nod because some people eat in silence. I'll remember your name the way my father did. I will not give you extra eggs for credit because I've learned my lesson. But if you're short $1, I will find a way to feed you. I've learned that too. Thanks for listening. This hurt. It also healed. I'm still here. I'm still cooking. I'm not going anywhere.